Hello and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Garth Neufeld along with Eric Landrum, your podcast host. As the name implies, we talk about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the and stuff. This is episode 59, where I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Lee Gurel, who has contributed so much to the teaching of psychology. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Mostly we're going to focus on his presidential citation from Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel as a citizen psychologist for his work with high school psychology. And as we get going here, I thought it might be nice for me just to read this presidential citation, and this will set up a lot of the interview. So let me begin. Lee Gurel, PhD, is recognized with this APA Citizen Psychologist Presidential Citation for his sustained advocacy for psychology at the secondary level and high school psychology teachers nationwide. Gurel has donated generously to the American Psychological Foundation to support his steadfast vision of increasing high-quality resources and professional development opportunities for high school teachers of psychology. In 2004, Gurel initiated the APA TOPS APF Clark University Workshop for teachers of high school psychology, with combined donations to APF and Clark. With his generosity, participants are able to attend for free. Held each summer since 2005, the workshop brings together 25 high school psychology teachers to learn from master teachers and psychology faculty to enhance their teaching and understanding of psychological science. In 14 years, over 300 teachers have attended this workshop, and thousands of students have benefited from their teachers' growth. In 2010, Gurel further donated funding to allow the development of APA Teachers of Psychology in secondary schools, TOPS, lesson plans, and other forms of professional development for teachers. For example, networking grants allow teachers to collaborate at a grassroots level, and regional groups have formed nationwide. In 2013, Gurel donated additional funding to APF to continue championing high school psychology. In explaining his reasoning behind another donation for an endowed education fund to Clark University, Gurel stated, "I feel that I, as we all do, owe a debt to the teachers and institutions that equipped us for fuller, more satisfying lives." But Gurel's support is more than financial. He thrives on encouraging teachers and generously sharing his time with them. His nominator and endorsers credit Gurel's personal involvement and their participation in the Clark Workshop for connecting them to a rich network of passionate professionals in the field. In addition to strengthening relationships and teachers' expertise, the Clark Workshop has inspired new leadership. For example, many of the participants have become elected members of the APA TOPS committee and or have returned to Clark as master teachers. Gurel also went to Xi'an, China as a volunteer teacher of English. This experience galvanized numerous donations to individuals and organizations. For example, he enhanced funding for the second and third prize recipients in the Chinese American Citizen Alliance essay contest, What Being an American Means to Me. Gurel has supported several programs at Northern Virginia Community College, where he took seniors' tuition-free courses. His endowments include a Student Emergency Financial Assistance Fund, enhanced support of selected staff and curriculum, and support of the Great Expectations program for foster youth. He also made donations to enhance the grounds and the library, and a donation so a previously homeless student was able to enroll. And that's the end of the citation. Obviously, Dr. Gurel has given so much to teachers and students, and so many people owe him a great debt. It was fantastic to talk to him, and you're going to hear some of these stories right from him in this interview. So without further delay, let's get to this interview with citizen psychologist Dr. Lee Gurel. Hi, everyone. This is Garth, and I am at the offices for the American Psychological Association, and I am with Dr. Lee Gurel, and it is an absolute privilege to be here with you today and to share a stage with you earlier today. So welcome to this podcast, which I'm sure you've never heard about, but I appreciate you doing it.
I'm delighted to be asked.
Great. So let's start with why we're here, and maybe I'll start with you. You live nearby. I imagine you drove here.
Yes, we live in the Northern Virginia area, this Washington suburb, and we drove in. My wife was my driver because I haven't driven since my leg went bad a couple of weeks ago, and that's what got us here at least.
Yeah, and why are you here today? Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the award, the recognition that was given today.
Well, I'm honored by being here to be recognized for my work in the not usual activities of psychology. It's really my functions as a citizen that landed me here in recognition of having done things to be useful to a lot of people, specifically high school teachers. It all started with my getting the idea that, hey, wouldn't it be nice to teach psychology in high school? Well, as it turned out, that was kind of late because a former roommate of my wife's, when they were in college, was a high school psychology teacher, and she was teaching psychology. So that one thing led to another. But my interest in high school psychology was a feeling that there was room for it. And if you could take psychology in high school, as people now are doing increasingly so, you got room for other material that's relevant to a psychologist's background. My first job after my degree was at Martinsburg, West Virginia, which is about 60 miles away. And I was working there, and I had a group of student trainees who were going after their doctorates at Catholic University. And I knew that, hey, some of these kids, and I was one of them actually, some of these kids knew more about a field of psychology that I didn't know much about, my PhD notwithstanding. I specifically was missing a sufficient background in statistics. So I knew of this gentleman, but one of the really good psych teachers of statistics was working part-time at Catholic U. And so I hopped in my car, and at that point, you know, we're talking about mid-50s, mid-1950s, it wasn't all that difficult to drive from Martinsburg to Catholic University, take Maury Lohr's advanced statistics course, and drive back that night. That's no longer quite as easy. But what I'm getting at is that if one could study psychology in high school, you had more time when you went beyond high school to study material that you would not otherwise have time for. And I was in the position of having graduated from, as my undergraduate degree was from Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. Now, Clark is not a particularly well-known school, except that it's a very highly regarded small college these days. And psychology and Clark were closely related. The first president of Clark was interested in developing the psychology teaching program, and he did so. And Clark was the outstanding teacher site for studying psychology. And we're talking now about the late 1800s, early 1900s. Okay, so I came from Clark, where psychology was very important, where, in fact, we're sitting here in the American Psychological Association building, but that's where the American Psychological Association began, was at Clark.
I didn't know that.
And when the students, high school teachers, students, come to Clark, they come to the room that was the office that was in the main building where Jonas Clark did his work. So anyhow, I wander, but I had the good fortune of having been to and known about Clark and its role in the history of psychology. And at the same time, I was moderately active in APA. I'm not an organization kind of individual, but I was interested in belonging to the Psychology Association and taking some part in it, which I did for a number of early years. So I could put together my college school and my professional association, and come up with the idea that, hey, Clark knows about psychology and APA knows about psychology students. Put them together and offer to the group that I was interested in, the high school level people, offer those teachers of psychology in high schools, and there weren't many of them, but there were a few, and it worked beautifully. The people from Clark and from APA who worked on developing this workshop for high school teachers, turns out that they were just superb people, and you may even have met one of them here today, Emily Chestnut. It was she and at the time, I guess she was one of the proctors or something at Clark worked together to put together a program for high school teachers. And I went to all of the sessions once it got started, and that would have been about 15 years ago, because there have been 14 sessions of this workshop for high school teachers. I've missed out for one reason or another the last couple of years. And that unique position benefited the people who were interested in developing teaching in high schools of psychology. There aren't many people who would ordinarily be thinking about a university to undertake such a new endeavor. But Clark, being what it was in the history of psychology, said, oh, sure, that's perfect for us. And they've been very good. It costs Clark, I know, a nice figure, at least for an individual, it's a nice figure, to provide free board and room for the people coming to the workshop. All they have to do is show up and be educated.
Yeah, it costs them nothing to attend. Is that correct? The high school teachers who come out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's about how I got to be recognized as you were today for the work you do.
Yeah, this citizen psychologist recognition by Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel. And yeah, what does it mean for you to contribute as a citizen and as a psychologist? Obviously, you can't pull those two things apart, but what does it mean to you to be recognized for all these contributions that you've made? And the citation was great. In fact, I might start out this episode, I'll just tell you this, that I might take a picture of it and read it, because I think it does give a nice background of all the work that you've done for psychology. But what does it mean to you to be recognized as a citizen psychologist?
Okay. To me, it means a great deal, in part because citizenship per se is so important. I came here, I'm one of the people who are not highly regarded by our government right now. I was an immigrant. I was 3 years old, and I landed in New York with my mother January 1st of 1930.
Wow. From where? Where were you born?
I was born in Poland. And my father had come over to this country to, try to improve life for him and his wife. He didn't know when he left that she was pregnant with me. So somehow the citizenry, the government, this whole area is important. It became a very important part of my life. We were, of course, very, very poor. My dad came over, and he worked as a busboy and waiter at a deli, and eventually saved enough nickels to get my mother and me over here, 1930. Now, they worked very hard and before too long, I worked with them. Eventually, they saved their nickels and got a little candy store.
Is this in New York City?
No, this would be in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh, it's in Worcester. All right.
Where Clark is.
Uh-huh.
And it just went from there. My father became a peddler. He drove through the mill towns around the Worcester area. I guess it's Blackstone River that went through provided power for some of the factories that grew up there. These factories no longer exist. In fact, the first time I saw Crompton and Knowles Looms Works, where I had worked part-time, in fact, while I was at Clark, I was saddened just so much. He was an important part of my life, and the building was just totally in wrecks because they no longer built looms there. And many of the industries that characterized Worcester were falling by the wayside. So, I guess what I'm getting away from is the experience of being an immigrant and growing up in a family that was working hard to establish themselves here. This had an impact on me, and that impact was very obvious when World War II happened. When I was 17, I wanted to join the Navy. Now, at 17, you can't join the Navy unless you get a parent to sign up for you. And that doesn't sound like such a big deal unless you stop and think, well, here's this immigrant couple with their one and only child willing to sign him up to go fight World War II. But the tenor of the times was such that everybody was, almost everybody, universally so, was what we think of as proud of their country and patriotic. The other guys were really the bad ones, and you had to go fight them. Okay, so my folks signed for me to get in the Navy, and I was in for a couple of years. I know full well that the Navy did more for me than I did for the Navy. But I guess that kind of background as a migrant is what we think of them as today, and the years of World War II and the tenor that it gave to the country, especially with Franklin Roosevelt as president. Now, we know that Roosevelt wasn't perfect, but he was certainly a remarkable president, and you just had a a feeling for this country as being yours. I think that somehow in the back of my head, many heads I assume, had you feeling that you owed the country something. You weren't just here to enrich yourself. You thought about what you could do for the country that you loved. But in that, with that background, it was easy for me to look on many situations and relate to them not so much as a psychologist, but as a citizen. Now, sure, I used what skills psychology had given me, but one could help the educational efforts in the country, and that's really where most of my most of the basis for the award today. But sometimes you could be a psychologist, and it had practically nothing to do with being a good citizen. I think, for example, one of the things that Dr. Daniel mentioned at the time, my wife had died cancer. I was single, and I was dating a woman, a Chinese woman, and went with her one time to a meeting of the local Chinese American Society. And that meeting was partly to honor 3 student compositions, and the 3 students got financial prizes. And it occurred to me that, gee, it's nice, but I felt that they gave so much money to the first prize winner and relatively little to the second and third prize winners. And I talked with those, all 3 of those at that meeting, and I talked with the parents of the third place winner, and it occurred to me later, and I cleared it with them, that is it okay if we supplement the prize money that they got, which I did. I supplemented the money for the second and third place winners. And it was a very good investment. I still am in touch with that youngster. She could have been like 16 years old at the time. She's since married, has a couple of kids. Her husband's a physician in North Carolina. They live a happy life as far as I know. But to me, support for those 2 kids is a kind of citizenship activity. You're supporting what goes on in terms of the development of people who are not just born to Anglo parents. Now, here I am talking to somebody who's very much involved with services for non-Anglo U.S. people. But I remember that partly because it's almost time again to send a Christmas card to this family. But my point is that if you are aware of the possibilities for citizenry kinds of activities, they're all around you. And I think other things were mentioned in the citation, other than the very big activity of supporting the work of Clark University and APA in developing this workshop for high school teachers of psych.
Yeah. Well, that's where I know your name from, is because those high school teachers speak so highly. They're so grateful for what you do. In fact, I just had Maria Vita on this same podcast.
Oh.
And she speaks so highly of you. And I think you know her.
Oh, I sure do.
Yeah.
Very well. She was, I think, in probably the third of the workshops that Clark and APA put on. And I worried about this kid because she looked so almost withdrawn. She was so quiet, and I wondered, hey, is she okay? Well, then there was a section of the workshop where the teacher students could present some input to the rest of the group. Well, at that time, Maria Vita was running RATS in teaching psychology, or in teaching at her high school. And she just blossomed. And it was amazing. And we've been in touch at times since then.
Now, she nominated you for this Citizen Psychologist
That's
Award,
right.
Is that right?
I didn't know that until earlier today, by the way. I surmised that it was the case. She had asked me for some kind of biographical stuff, which I presented and forgot about it. She never said what she wanted it for, but I guess it was useful for her to have that information to suggest the nomination. Yeah, I know. When I get home, I'm certainly going to be in touch with her.
Yeah, it's interesting that here you and I are given these citations for Citizen Psychologist, and the people who nominated us, for me, Linda Wolf, I'm not sure if you know her, but
No.
and for you, Maria Vita. And I know both of those folks pretty well, and I would say that they are both citizen psychologists in their own right,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I know that the folks who go to Clark, I've not been. I hope to get out there someday. I'd love to see it. But they are so appreciative of what you have done in creating that and sustaining that for them. I know that they have, even now, I think they're trying to copy the model because of some additional funding they have received. Have you heard about that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're in the loop.
Much bigger bucks than I ever had.
Yeah, so it sounds like Dave Myers is going to help them out to do that,
Yes.
so that more high school teachers can experience this thing.
Yeah.
It seems really. It seems like it is kind of a game changer for high school teachers to attend there.
Yes. If nothing else, there there is a reward for them in being recognized and treated the way they get treated. And I had very little to do with this, I assure you. They are treated as contributing members of society who have something important to offer and who deserve the support and respect of the rest of the population. I'm delighted. It may very well be, incidentally, that sometime in the future the Clark APA workshop will die off. Entirely possible, because other people are getting interested in supporting high school psychology. And I have to say, I had hoped early on in the series of workshops, hey, wouldn't it be great to duplicate the Clark APA workshop elsewhere? And in fact, I met with the woman who at the time headed up the education office that we're sitting in. And she was supportive, but didn't have the funds for it. And one of the things we hoped would happen did. The teachers got to know one another at the workshop, and those that were geographically close to one another developed a little kernel of self-help. And that's what a new workshop like the one that's been going on, what that's going to be like. I did not go to the one in, I forget where it was now, the recent one. It was held in Utah. It was an APA-sponsored...
The high school summit.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, that's it. The word summit keeps coming up for that meeting.
Yeah.
The hope that we had before there was talk of summit was that small groups would get together where it was geographically possible, and some of them started doing that. But it was all very informal, and they particularly enjoyed learning from one another. I mean, one psych teacher in high school knows something that the teacher down the road doesn't know about, and they trade and learn from one another. And that now is going to, with the money that Dave Myers contributed to APF, that will help to develop the kinds of workshop experiences that hopefully go beyond what Clark had to offer.
Well, I hope that Clark stays around for a long time. But I do hear what you're saying. There is now support that wasn't there 15 years ago when Clark started. What was available for high school students back in 2000 or whenever you were starting to think about Clark?
You mean what was available to them?
I'm sorry, for high school psychology teachers. Teachers, yes.
There wasn't very much in the way of formal assistance. Now, those who wanted to go on and get an advanced degree, get their master's, and a couple of them, like somebody that was here today who's been active in the psychology teacher group, Amy Feinberg.
Oh, Feinberg, yeah.
I mean, she, for example, is an example of somebody who could mobilize some people locally, and they could get together informally. And those groups did spring up. and they learned from one another. There wasn't any structured kind of workshop or educational trade-offs in those early years. This would have been like, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They could have been history teachers, and one day the principal came in and said, "Oh, you're teaching psychology this year." That happened a lot.
Still does.
Yes, it does. And these people learned on their own. They learned by meeting other psychology teachers who knew just a smidgen more than they did. Not much, maybe, but a smidgen more. Now it's a lot more organized.
Yeah.
And hopefully, as the workshop model expands in other areas, it will prove to be a big resource.
So I have a question. When did it occur to you that high school was the place where you wanted to put your investment? Did you have a conversation with somebody? Did it? Were you in a meeting where you realized there was this need? Or who are these high school teachers that you had met or seen?
Okay, there was only one high school teacher that I knew even reasonably well. She had gone to college in Virginia with somebody who was actually teaching psychology in high school. And at one point when I said to this woman, "Gee, wouldn't it be nice if they taught high school and psychology, taught psychology in high school?" And she said, "Lee, that's what I do for a living." She was actually one of the few psych teachers around. Of course, this was in a Northern Virginia community, which is pretty advanced. And that just stimulated me to think, hey, wouldn't it be nice if other schools could get psych teachers going? And what motivated me, I was telling somebody earlier today, was my thinking that, hey, here I am, I'm the assistant chief psychologist in a department of 2, and I'm spending time driving from Martinsburg to Catholic University, where Maury Law, a good teacher of psychology, and well-known statistician, I had to go take a coursework with him at the expense. I'm thinking much more of, just driving to class to Catholic University to learn something that I could have learned if I had had more time in graduate school. I would have taken that course then. This was advanced statistics. But hey, your graduate school time is filled as it is with a lot of coursework. And that's what made me think, well, hey, there's so much time that you waste in high school. If that time could be spent doing a psych course, as it is increasingly being done now, then you'd have more time when you got to graduate school to do these courses that you need and want to take, instead of coursework that you could have done when you were in high school. It was that. I mean, I just happened to have been lucky in knowing this woman. We'll see her again in a few days when we exchange Christmas presents. But, that helped me to organize my thinking that, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had psychology in high school to free up some of the room that you need in college and graduate school.
Yeah. Well,
it's as simple as that.
Well, it was an idea that has gone on to help a lot of high school teachers, and I know that I speak for them directly because I've heard it from their mouths. That if you've never heard it, I will now represent them. Thank you for your contribution to high school psychology. On behalf of all those teachers who attend Clark and all those who will attend Clark and this new model. It is so meaningful. It touches their lives. It touches their students' lives. Hopefully we are creating in our high school students citizens that will go on to do great things and take care of people as you've done in your career. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it was so nice to hear your story and to sit down with you. And I've just appreciated this day that we've been able to spend together. So yeah. So have a great day. We will see you around. It seems like I only run into you at APA, so maybe I'll see you back here again someday soon.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully so. Thank you.